TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube are the reason why Milei could win. And he got almost 70% of the vote between 16 and 24. Argentina has a fascist tradition. The unions are mafias. It's not running a developed country. It's really, they are like criminal-like organizations. And I don't believe that there's gonna be any run on the peso, and that they will have massive inflationary problems because of this.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Institute of Economic Affairs podcast. I'm Tom Clougherty and I'm joined today by Axel Kaiser, a friend and advisor to Argentina's president, Javier Milei. We're going to talk about the libertarian economist's first year in power, what it means for Argentina, for the rest of Latin America, and indeed for the rest of the world. Axel is also the Friedrich Hayek Chair at Adolfo Ibanez University in Santiago in Chile. And he's a senior fellow at the Atlas Center for Latin America based in Miami. Axel, welcome to the IEA podcast.
Happy to be with you. Thank you very much.
Well, look, we're here to talk about Javier Milei, Argentina's president, and how things are going a year into his time in office. But I wonder if we can just start with some background for our viewers and listeners who may not know an awful lot about Argentina. When Milei became president just over a year ago, how bad was the situation in Argentina? What was it that he faced on taking office?
Well, basically, a country that was in ruins. You had inflation running at 25% a month, but with a spiraling dynamic that could have ended up in 17,000% per year. You had 50% of people living under the poverty line. The state had no money, like the central bank was broke. No dollars, and no economic growth. Millions of Argentinians starving in a country that produces food for 400 million people. So, it was a complete catastrophe. It's hard to imagine how bad the situation was. And a ticking time bomb that the previous administration left him in order to destroy him while he was running the country in terms of debt and commitments, fiscal commitments and things like that. No access to capital markets and so on. You name it. All the symptoms of a generalized economic crisis, economic, fiscal crisis, all combined. And it was very. It was like treating a patient with terminal cancer.
I see. So basically, if you can think of something bad, economically speaking, Argentina was suffering from it over a year ago. And it's important to say that Argentina was once one of the richest countries in the world. Before the First World War, it was a top 10 global economy. It was richer per capita, I think, than France and Germany. It was roughly on a par with Canada. So this enormous divergence over the course of the 20th century and beyond is really something quite shocking. I suppose regular listeners will have some idea of why that happened, or at least will be able to guess. But can you tell us briefly, how did Argentina get into such an appalling economic state?
Well, actually, according to some calculations, Argentina had the highest per capita income in the world in 1895, 1896. And it was among the top 10 economies until the early 20th century. What happened was that they abandoned the classical liberal principles of Juan Bautista Alberdi, who had been like the father of the 1853 Constitution. So they moved away from those principles. Already in the 1920s, they started embracing statism, collectivism, and later on what we know as Keynesianism. And with the Great Depression, which impacted the whole world, they also closed down the economy, started to, have this import substitution system. And but the main destructor of Argentina was General Juan Domingo Perón, who is a very well-known figure. He was an admirer of Mussolini. He wanted fascism in terms of economic system. He wasn't a communist. He didn't like the communists. Actually, was very much in favor of Catholicism, and he was not an atheist, as far as I know. And he embraced this corporatism, this very corrupt alliance between the unions, the government, and the corporations. And economic nationalism ended up ruining Argentina, and it became a kleptocratic society. And what Perón did in reality was a very deep cultural transformation in the mentality of Argentinians. It's unbelievable how far-sighted he was, Juan Domingo Perón, because he understood it was about the ideas, and he has actually some discourses where he argues that we need to make Peronism the national culture, and they achieved that. At some point, Peronism and Argentinianism, so to speak, were indistinguishable. I mean, you would think about Argentina, and Argentina is Perón. It's Peronism. Everyone is a Peronist. It doesn't matter if you're right or left or whatever. You are a Peronist, and you believe in economic nationalism, and so on. And what is happening right now, and I think this is the most interesting part of the Milei story, we are doing a revolution, a cultural revolution, a revolution in mentality that goes into the opposite direction. So I think you can only compare what Milei is achieving with what Perón achieved for ill, not for good, but Milei is achieving it for the right side and for good. And so this cultural revolution, I think, and I hope it will last for a couple of governments, maybe generations, and Argentina will take off. It's already showing signs of recovery. So this will reinforce the discourse, the libertarian approach.
I mean, that's fascinating, really. So you're talking about a political, economic, intellectual counter-revolution, effectively, in a country that has been mired in a kind of socialism for decades. Now, the kind of Argentina you described, with all of those economic problems, with this deep-seated cultural attachment to Peronism, how was it that in 2023, someone who was a free market economist, the presidential candidate of the Libertarian Party, someone who I think talks about Friedman and Mises and Rothbard and so on, he was seen as the answer? Was this just, did the Argentinian people come to this in kind of desperation? Thinking, well, everything else has failed and we have to go for this? Or before he was even elected, had these ideas started to take off? Were people increasingly drawn to free market ideas before he became president?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We did a cultural revolution in Argentina that took place like a decade before Milei came to power. And of course, he became like the main figure. And at some point when he joined this movement, he was so powerful, so charismatic, and so convinced that he managed to make it a popular phenomenon. But there were some people doing this before him on the political landscape, like José Luis Espert, who introduced the free market ideas into politics, like in a more popular way. And then plenty of intellectuals. Myself, I played some role in this over the last 15 years. I've been going to Argentina a lot, giving interviews, giving speeches. My books have been published there. That's how I met Javier Milei. We became friends. And so, yeah, the cultural revolution, especially among the youth. And for this, social media was key. TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube are the reason why Milei could win. And he got almost 70% of the vote between 16 and 24. So the youth is the base of his support. So the thing is that he became the rebel. Yeah. And it's usually history has been like that. People who believe in freedom are rebelling against the establishment, which is oppressive, right? At some point, I don't know why the rebels became the Marxists and the people who wanted to go back to absolutist forms of government, right? But Milei, with his charisma, his personality, his insolence, even his language, and his ability to predict what was going to happen, because he's a very good economist. So he could say, this is going to happen. Everyone was laughing at him, I remember. And then it came to happen exactly the way he had predicted over years. And so that gave him also a lot of credibility. And he's someone who would sing also on stage. So he brought literally rock and roll to the movement. He made the movement sexy. He's not the scholar with the tie and the suit, speaking to people. No, he's really a rock star, the Mick Jagger of liberalism, we say, or of libertarianism, or classical liberalism, and that's what seduced the youth. And also the country was doing so poorly that I think people were more and more open to new ideas. So it was a combination of factors. But without Milei and without the Cultural Revolution, this would have been impossible. Completely impossible. You needed the leader. It's like Thatcher in the UK. You need the person in the right moment. Okay, so that's what happened, and I think he still has this very high popularity. Like 50% of people here still support him, even though he made this radical adjustment, fiscal terms, right? One of the most dramatic adjustments ever done in recorded history. And they believe in him, and they have hope that the future will be better. And now you're seeing inflation is below 3% per month, which is high for us, but for Argentina, it's like unbelievable, and also is falling and falling, and the dollar is not moving very much. It used to be the case that from one day to the next, you would have a devaluation of 10%, 15% of your currency, or 5% or whatever. Over month, you could have 25% devaluation, and so, or 20, or, so it was very unstable. And Argentina is somehow dollarized because people think in terms of dollars because, the peso is trash. But they have stabilized the currency. It's amazing. And there was a ranking he posted the other day, Javier Milei, like the most stable currency in the world was like the Argentinian peso recently.
So
it's amazing.
Inflation is down sharply and continues to fall. And although it will probably settle at a level that to many of us still seems quite high, as you say, for Argentina is quite a remarkable achievement. There's been this huge fiscal correction, cutting public spending in real terms by about 30%, I believe, in this first year. Now, this is quite remarkable to British ears, because I remember in the wake of the financial crisis, like in 2010, you had a government coming in and it was supposedly a very radical austerity plan, just to get debt falling and the books balanced in 5 years' time. And often it was a hypothetical 5 years' time that stretched further and further out into the future as you went. Now, as I understand it, Milei, in his first month, delivered a primary surplus and has done that every month since. How on earth did he achieve that?
Well, he told the people before he was elected what he was going to do, that there was no money, but inflation is a monetary phenomenon that is, related to the fiscal deficit, that they had to cut spending dramatically. And when he came into office, that's exactly what he did. And he explained what he was doing it, that there was no other way, and Argentinians accepted it because he told the truth. And that's why they elected him. He was elected precisely, in order to solve the crisis. And he said, I'm going to cut spending dramatically. It's going to be tough. A little bit like, I don't want to compare because the situations are completely different. But like when Churchill said, I have nothing to offer but, pain and tears. I don't remember exactly the term, but something like that. So it's time for standing on our own feet and do what is right, and it's going to be tough, but then we'll see the sun again. And he has maintained this discourse over 8 years. And when he won, he didn't change a comma in his view, and now he's been 1 year in office exactly the same. And people are seeing the results, because this is the other thing. Inflation is plummeting. Economic growth is starting to appear, early signs of that. There are projections that for next year they will grow 5-7%. And then you have the salaries catching up with inflation. So people are happy because they see the progress that is being made, and they're experiencing it. It's still, at the early stages, but they are feeling it a little bit. And he also didn't forget about the poorest in society, so he increased some subsidies to the poorest, which was also part of you need to do that politically, is really important. And what also helped him was the unveiling of all these corruption scandals. Like when they came into office, they realized how massively they were stealing the money, the previous administration. All they called them curros, all the corrupt deals within the political class and with other people like corporations, and which cost millions or billions to Argentinians every year. And so he started showing all this, and people were saying, this is insane. I mean, we knew that things were corrupt, but not at this scale. It's like, it is one thing they tell you everything is corrupt, and it's the other thing when they show you the amount of money that some people are getting for nothing, or, the privileges they have. So this was, I think, part also of his success, because he's clean, which is very rare in Argentina. So like they cannot find anything, and trust me, they looked everywhere in order to find some sort of, stain on Milei's shirt, and they didn't find anything. So all of these factors and his international agenda, with Elon Musk, with all the great names, Wall Street, and now with Donald Trump, and all of that has helped him a lot as well, because Argentinians like to be proud about their country. And Milei has become like this icon for the whole West. Like recently, former finance minister in Germany, Christian Lindner, was citing Milei as an example of what Germany should do in terms of structural reforms.
I think that's a really interesting point, Axel, actually. You mentioned Elon Musk as well. And of course, Musk is co-heading up this Department of Government Efficiency for incoming President Trump. On paper, planning to make some quite significant cuts to US federal expenditure. And you mentioned Germany there as well, talking about Milei as an example. Do you think that there are lessons that other countries in very different situations with quite different starting points can learn from what's happening in Argentina? I mean, ultimately, all of us in Europe, most of us in the developed world, have aging populations and high debt loads and kind of fiscal burdens, which are just going to grow and grow without radical action. The problem is it never seems like radical action has any chance of succeeding in most of our countries. Can we learn from Milei, or is this a uniquely Argentinian experience?
I don't think so, because you have other cases of countries that have been, in deep trouble and have been able to recover, like the UK. I mean, decades ago under Margaret Thatcher, and then you have many other countries and examples. So what's new is that this time it's a country that is also an example of everything you shouldn't do in economic terms. And Argentina is a well-known country internationally. It's not a small country. It's a relevant country. They have oil, they have gas, they have all sorts of minerals and resources, and and human capital and Messi and so on. So everyone knows about Argentina. And I think the main lesson is the courage to do structural reforms, to engage in this or propose these structural reforms. Like the UK needs this desperately. We all know it. Very high cost of energy. The economy is not working. You have huge fiscal imbalances and so on. So the question is not whether you are going to have to do reforms and substantial reforms, but whether you are going to wait until the situation is so critical that you have no other option, and the pain for everyone is much greater. That's the only question. It's not if you are going to do the reforms, it's when are you going to do it, and under which circumstance. Do you have to wait until you look like Argentina or something like that, or you are, maybe that's an extreme case, but in a much worse situation than you are right now in Europe, for instance? Or are you going to address the issues? And that's, I think, what you can learn from Milei, the courage to tell the people the truth. The courage to tell them this is not working. It's not going to there is no viable future if we continue like this. We have to do these reforms and we will be better off, because I know the populations in Europe are frustrated. This you are seeing. and certain polls and other, political realities that you observe, like parties emerging, like AfD in Germany and others. So the courage to tell the truth, I think that's really important, and that the people supports you. It's the only way you're gonna be able to make the reforms. If the people are not with you, because you have not been honest with them, you are not going to be able to do any reforms, because of course it's easier for everyone to expect the problem to go away without suffering a little bit or without any sort of pain, and this is simply not possible. So that's why the politicians don't want to do the reforms, because they know it's costly in political terms, but there is no alternative. Sooner or later, the UK, Germany, France, Spain, all of these countries, even the US, with the fiscal problem they will have to do it. I think Argentina is going to be used as an example and a role model more and more by everyone. I mean, if Argentina can do it, why not the UK? Why not, France and Germany, Austria, all these countries who have problems? The same, the US. I think the US now with Trump and Elon Musk and all the deregulation that's going on there, and we'll see about the fiscal side. I'm not sure that they will address that. I think that could also have an influence on the West, on the rest of the West, and Milei is certainly a case in point, someone we would use as an example. Imagine Argentina growing at 7% a year for the next couple of years.
Yeah,
that's hard to ignore.
It would be very hard to ignore, and it certainly would send a strong message. So, I mean, I think a lot hinges on the future success of Milei and how well he does over the coming years, not just what's happened already. Can we talk about that briefly? I mean, what's on Milei's agenda for his second year, third year as president? Are there any big? I mean, of course, there are huge challenges, but are there any big sort of keynote things that he's going to face where perhaps it could go wrong? I know he had a very favorable profile written of him in The Economist recently, and they flagged this idea of basically abolishing capital controls, of floating the currency as a potential point where things could get really hairy for Milei and his administration. Do you see those kind of challenges, or do you have a lot of faith that things will continue to go well and continue to get better?
I think they will navigate those challenges. I think they have a very good team. I know them, very smart people, and Milei is also a very good economist. So they will lift the capital controls. They have to do it. They have no option, and that will be, I think, very soon. And I don't believe that there's going to be any run on the peso, and that they will have massive inflationary problems because of this. They have been accumulating dollar reserves. Now also they have Donald Trump in the United States, and I think he's going to be more than willing to help in order to provide credits or whatever that they might need. So also, the structural reforms are very reassuring for investors and for people from other countries, maybe, that want to go to Argentina and see what opportunities you have. And the fiscal balance, it's gonna be respected. So, from that part, you're not going to print money to fund the deficit, and everyone knows that, because Milei is like, this is his religion. So it's like completely extreme when it comes to this, and I think rightly so. So the credibility is hard to restore, but they are working on that. And who will not want to go to Argentina if there is a ton of money to make there?
Yeah.
They are still a little skeptical because it's Argentina, the reputation is not good. But Milei is also doing a great job in restoring Argentina's reputation. And I believe that if he delivers, and he will, a high rate of economic growth, 4, 5, 6, 7%, he will be reelected. And he will have a majority in parliament next year. So I think those are not going to be big threats. You never know, but I believe it's going to be under control.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously been drawing parallels or trying to see if we can have some hope for Britain, for other European countries, for the United States from Argentina. Of course, what does this mean for Latin America, for other Latin American countries where perhaps Argentina had one of the most severe economic problems, at least? There are other countries with like serious political problems. But I think when you were on this podcast before, you said that actually there was a lot of hope for Latin America, that there was increasingly a move towards these free market, limited government ideas across the continent. Is that something that you still see? And is Milei really acting as an example and as an inspiration?
I absolutely think that's going to be the case. Argentina growing at higher rates under Milei will be such massive defeat for the left in our region. Ideologically speaking, they know it. They're terrified because it's not like Milei was a technocrat that came and did the reforms and the country is being fixed. No, he explicitly linked the reforms to a libertarian narrative and a framework of conflict between ideas and ideologies, because he understands that that's the key, right? Like Sir Anthony Fisher understood that as well, and Hayek was an influence on him. So, and Margaret Thatcher also understood this. So I think that ideologically, it's going to be a massive defeat for the left. Of course, the left always survives in Latin America. It's very hard to see them disappear. That's not going to happen. But I think we will have stronger pressure, in order to implement good economic policies, because most of our Latin America, almost with no exception, is also in economic trouble. Paraguay is an exception, Uruguay to some extent, and maybe three other countries, small countries. But if you take a look at Colombia, it's a mess, Chile is a mess right now. Brazil is another mess. Venezuela, forget it. Most of Central America is a mess. And then you have Mexico, which it's not, I don't know how it's going to play out with Sheinbaum and her agenda to consolidate power in one hand, because, the judicial reform in Mexico is really posing a threat to liberal democracy there. And so they control all the branches of government. But Milei has more influence, I would say, in South America because of the proximity. But symbolically and ideologically, he has all over the West now, I would say. He's the hottest girl in the party. Everyone speaks about him, everyone wants to dance with him, everyone wants to see what he's doing, and no one believed that he was going to be elected, and even less so that he was going to survive. Like the first 3 months. Argentina has a fascist tradition. The unions are mafias. It's not running a developed country. It's really, they are like criminal-like organizations, and they have not even cut one street since he is there.
Yeah,
has been there, and he has also brought crime down, which is important, So I hope that this continues like this, and I think it will. And it will be a huge triumph for liberty. At some point it was Reagan and Thatcher, and now it's going to be Javier Milei.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. It's an exciting prospect. Even making it to the end of this first year and having the successes that he's had is an enormous achievement, but it sounds like there's a lot more in store. So we'll keep watching and we'll keep our fingers crossed. But exciting times for Argentina. Axel Kaiser, thank you so much for joining us on the IEA podcast today.
Thank you very much. See you next time.